Evolution in Divine Love is an invitation to reimagine everything from the place where it all begins and where it all returns. Love.
So welcome to our next episode of Evolution in Divine Love podcast. Today we will be furthering our conversation on the chapter of Can God Be Updated? We'll be speaking with Swami Padmanabha first, and then with Kulapradipa in the second part of this episode. And we're going to be focusing on two qualities of God, his changelessness and his expansive or evolutionary nature. So thank you for coming, Padmanabha Maharaj, and furthering the conversation in this podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so you started with a very interesting way for us to be able to frame the paradox of these apparently contradictory terms, contradictory nature of God. And you frame it within grammar, and you speak of changelessness as a noun, and becomingness or expansion or evolution as verbs. And you found that this is how it's actually referred to within Shastra. So as I was reading these sections, what really struck me was how it's not that because God is absolute, it's not that he's just this one thing over here or this one thing over here. And what does that simultaneous nature mean? And how is that resolved within the absolute? And what really struck me is when I considered, well, what if at one moment he was just one of those things? What would happen to existence if he wasn't the other at the same time? So I'm wondering if you could just speak to the nature of paradox and how to approach these apparently contradictory qualities of God in a way that nourishes our understanding of both, and it actually affects how we live in the world.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the book, paradox holds the most truth. And of course, God is the personification of truth. So if paradox holds the most truth, God is then the most paradoxical figure, right? Who integrates in himself, herself, themselves to begin with, and apparently contradictory features. No, again, contradictory from our lack of capacity to integrate something bigger and deeper, but that's not a problem for the divine. So while the book is mostly, in one sense, emphasizing the ever-evolvingness of the divine and of everything in reality, I try to make justice to the case that there are many sections in the scripture which describe the sweet absolute as changeless. Not only God, but even the soul as changeless. So, okay, well, we don't want to be exclusivistic, right? So real perfection is inclusive, not exclusive. So yeah, he or she or them, again, the sweet absolute is changeless in the sense that God is eternally consistent in identity. That he's changeless doesn't mean that God is inert, that God is emotionally frozen, so to say, that God is indifferent, that God is boring, but that he doesn't undergo those typical changes that, for example, we in a conditioned state undergo. The Bhagavatam uses these words, abhikriyam, abhyayam, kutashta, all of them implying he doesn't change. But he doesn't change again in which way? It's always important to clarify. So he doesn't change in the way that he doesn't stop becoming God, he doesn't stop becoming love, he doesn't change his sense of identity in a mundane way as we may do. So he's not carried by those ups and downs that we may in our lack of self-awareness. So in that sense, God is changeless, or as I like to say, in the sense that he's always evolving, that doesn't change, right? So, but at the same time, again, he's changeless. Like Rupa Goswami says in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, right? I think he used the word Swarupa Samprapta. God is always himself. God is always situated in his Swarup, eternal identity, in a list of qualities of Krishna. And then two qualities after that, he says he's Nityanutana, or ever fresh. So he puts both qualities almost one after another to create that paradox, to put us in a place where we are invited to think about things in a different way. So I will say that, again, paradox holds the most truth, and we need to, besides understanding God as changeless and ever evolving, we are ideally to relate to the whole of reality from a paradoxical perspective. Again, paradox in this case doesn't mean like it's impossible to understand, it's bewildering, but just it's inviting us to hold bigger space or to include certain things that usually we do not tend to be possible in the equation. So it's a daily exercise to embrace more and more paradox. Again, paradox holds the most truth, and truth is expanding, therefore paradox is expanding as well. So we are invited to develop that type of paradoxical thinking more and more.
Yeah, thank you for that. And when you were speaking too, I was thinking how, we need to put everything in context. That's what our acharyas do. Like they'll say that God is changeless, and then the next second say how he is ever, ever fresh and ever new. So again, those two things will find unity in the context of love. So bringing those two things, how does everything fit within that? And everything then really makes sense.
Do you have a question, Radhika, or a comment?
Yeah, I was just sorry. I was just wondering earlier when you were talking about it about God being a noun and verb also. I was just wondering that if it's beneficial at some point in our practice to hold on to one of those. Like is it too much, like, maybe in the beginning stages to understand or even hear that God is changing? Like, is it beneficial? Like, yeah, because my own understanding, I never thought that, yeah, God could be changing. It's like when I'm reading your book, I had this aha moment, like, God is also becoming, So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I appreciate the point because, and I try to address that in certain sections of the book, that the fact that we talked in, I think it was in our introductory meeting, that there are pauses in between the sections because sometimes we need to take a break and a deep breath about like, okay, what's all this? And it may be too overwhelming to internalize, process the notion of a very ever evolving reality, especially for those of us who are, how to say, that for us, so for those of us who read change as uncertainty or instability, and everyone looks for some stability, for something that is fixed, for something that is changeless. So that's there in the divine again. But yeah, I agree that in some stages we may need to receive further more emphasis on this changeless side, safe side, quote unquote, like not changing, always the same, so we can feel okay, it will be always there, I'm safe, there's no change, evolution, all this dynamic. I need some relief, some shelter, not so much surprise, and I don't want to deal with so much unpredictable dynamics. But again, at one point we need to gradually introduce a notion of ever evolvingness without doing away with the changelessness of God, but in a way that gives us a more realistic picture, because as I've tried to share in the book, both sides are there. It's not just one nor the other. Also, not in speaking about God's being ever evolving, we do away with all forms of changelessness. So trying to put them away. But yeah, in the beginning, we may need more an idea of a divine who is more quote unquote stable. We need security. We don't want to be kicked out from our comfort zone when things can be different, when we can be challenged, when there is an eternal space for growth and development. For some, that can be too much. I totally empathize with that. And from that place, like with any other of my books, I am like, not necessarily everyone has to read my book. Some people may read it and feel like, oh, that's too much. But that's why I try to bring the notion of changelessness as much as I could to balance the equation. No? We are not just talking here about the chaotic, random, ever-evolvingness that at any moment becomes something different in every sense of the term, because that's not the case. So yeah, God is changing on the foundation of his changelessness, right? On the fact that he's always the divine, that he's always love, and so on and so forth, that he's always an ocean of mercy. In that context, not in any and every context, there is evolution, there is unfolding, there is expansion of those things that have been always there. Again, love, mercy, and so on, divinity, humanity. So it's an extension and an expansion of changeless values, so to say. So that's how we could put it, to try to, again, balance both, and not have people too overwhelmed by these ideas.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. One thing I was thinking that's like deeply healing is knowing that God is not aloof. That's also kind of like, which you mentioned in this section, that, it's part of like thinking God is static and he's away, he's not understanding our pain, and like, he's distant from it. So for me, I think it's very healing to know that God is not aloof. He empathizes, like he can understand, even though he's himself is not experiencing the pain, I mean.
I mean, he's experiencing some type of pain. He may not be having an experience like we may be having as conditioned souls, but our pain as conditioned souls creates a pain in God from his enlightened place in the form of compassion. So again, it's not that he's not feeling anything, and he just have a theoretical understanding. Oh yeah, those guys over there are suffering. Yeah, I can imagine that's what's taking place now. But he's really feeling something, but from, again, an enlightened place. So yeah, that's the point we made in the book, impassibility, right? Not impossibility, although I make a play of words, like an impassible God, one who doesn't feel anything, is an impossible God, right? Because if we say that the divine cannot be touched by the world, by our experiences, impassibility somehow contradicts love. The nature of love is, again, full of relatedness and empathy and compassion. So, and if we speak of God as omniscient, on some level at least, omnipresent, and so on, in one way or another, we have to conclude, and I try to make that point, that yeah, he's not entirely impossible. So again, comes all this nuance. Okay, I'm not saying that he's not impossible in any way. We could say he's impossible in terms of he does not undergo the experience of being a conditioned being, but that doesn't go to the extreme of he doesn't feel anything, and because that's the risk you made of God, an iceberg, basically. Like he's so transcendent, he's so beyond everything that he doesn't feel anything for anyone. And that's, again, God is transcendent, but God is immanent as well. He's beyond everything and he's inside everything. Again, we go back to paradox. And that's our whole philosophy, right? Achintya vida aveda. No? He's different and non-different, which can mean so many things. Again, transcendent and immanent, changeless and ever-evolving. And all that is achintya, which could be translated as paradoxical. So yeah, it's important to have a coherent idea of the sweet absolute, because that will affect how we approach practice and our life and how we relate to others by extension. Because if God is, I make the point in the book, if God is the source of everything and everyone, how we conceive the divine will affect how we conceive everyone else. And I made a similar point. Since everything is interrelated, souls, matter, God, how we conceive the world will affect how we relate to God and ourselves. And how we conceive ourselves will affect how we relate to God and the world. So that's why it's so important to have a coherent picture of what is what, Sambandha, right? Who is God? What's the soul? What's the world? And have a realistic, coherent picture, not something that is some partial views, some projections, some filtering through unresolved childhood stuff, whatever, right? So yeah, that's why it's an entirely impossible God is an impossible God. It cannot be that way.
Yeah, you mentioned that in the book, and you also bring up mutually interactive verb, which is kind of what you're speaking of here, that God is not isolated, but it's mutually interactive. And you mentioned the word Godding, as there's God, and then the interactive God is Godding as a verb. And
yeah, that's not actually just to make. That's not my idea, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm quoting there
David Cooper.
David Cooper, yeah, an author called David Cooper. So he will emphasize, again, there's the noun side, but he will emphasize the verb side. So he will refer to God as Godding. Like, again, active, dynamic, ever evolving. So going back to the noun verb analogy. And again, in our tradition, that ever evolving side, it's very present, as I try to make the point, right? Just by the very name of the absolute, right? For example, Brahman. Brahman is one of the most famous terms to refer to the absolute in the Upanishads, in the Vedanta. And Brahman, which many times, interestingly, we tend to identify with static, unmoving, divine. The very root word for Brahman, Brahm, means to move, to grow and to make other grow, interestingly. And some other translations of Brahm is to swell, right? Like to overflow. So Brahman is he or she or them who grows and makes other grow. So you cannot get more ever evolving than that. In the very root of that word is inserted this notion of how the absolute is in constant evolution and relishing everything, his own identity, everything. That's also what I mentioned, referring, of course, to Krishna, the all attractive, another name of the absolute, which indicates ever evolving beauty, with the image of Krishna sucking his own toe and finding sweetness in his toe, like what's called sometimes the Ouroboros in other traditions, which is kind of a circular, ever self-nourishing dynamic of God finding new, ever fresh attraction, even to his own self, but without being narcissistic, of course. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us for these few moments and speaking of such relishing topics of God's changelessness and his ever evolvingness.
Oh, my pleasure. And one more note that comes to my mind that I think is inside this section is that how God is affected by the love of his devotees, and like Chaitanya Charitamrita says, like the servant is transformed by the qualities of the Lord is also transformed by the qualities of the servant. So God becomes what love requires. As I like to put it, God is a byproduct of love. And he reciprocates in a very unique form with every single soul, and adopting a particular shape or form that is irrepeatable, that is exactly to reciprocate with the affection of every devotee, right? So as I like to put that thing in my book, we are not only made in God's image, but God is made in love's image, right? Poetically speaking, his spiritual form is carved out of the particular love that he's receiving, that he's impacted with. So yeah, there's much more to say, but I want to mention that point in the context of what doesn't change about him is all that. So that's changeless. That's the fact that doesn't change, how much he's affected and responding and reciprocating to very unique, radically personal type of love. And again, reciprocating accordingly, as he says in the Gita, as someone worships me, I worship them accordingly, I reciprocate accordingly. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing out that very important point of God's constantly remaining affected by love.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maurice.
Yeah, I love that part. God made in love's image. I think that was my favorite in this section.
Yeah. Constantly carved out by the impact of love. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. See you soon.
We have the great pleasure of welcoming Kulapradipa with us today. And hopefully you have watched his episode with Swami on the Free Radical podcast. If not, I highly recommend it. So thank you, Kulapradipa, joining us from Austria today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bhakti Ras. Thank you, Swetadweep. It's really great to be here speaking with you on this new book. I've read some sections about it, and it's very exciting. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Before we started recording, you mentioned that you had been speaking at one time with Swami Padmanabha about process theology. So is that something that you yourself are interested in, and is
Well, actually, he wrote to me because he was looking for a copy of my Guru Maharaj's, my Diksha Guru's PhD dissertation, which was on Charles Hartshorne, who's one of the most recognized person for process theology, which is a very interesting perspective of what God is in terms of, I'll say, omnipotence, or as we say, immutable, changeless. What does that really mean? Have we understood that correctly?
Yeah, so it's a lot about God in his becoming.
Exactly, yeah. It's not just a being, supreme being or supreme becoming, some people would say.
Yeah, so I can understand why your name came up when trying to figure out who should be talking about, who we should invite to talk about this topic of God as changeless and God as becoming. And so now it makes sense. Thank you for joining. I'm wondering, just on a personal level, how you can see, how would thinking of God as changeless, how do you think that affects people's approach to God? What kind of relationship do you see that if people consider God as changeless, how would they relate with a changeless God?
I think it would be, I don't think it's difficult if you want to have some type of connection with the Supreme. It's helpful in understanding something of an entity or a being or divinity that is permanent, continually present. A lot of our definitions are that something true doesn't change. And I think that was a very fundamental thing for me as a young devotee, that I needed to find a truth that was going to be permanent. But I think and what Swamiji has been talking about, and a lot of our Gaudiya tradition has spoken about, and many traditions have spoken about, is that there's a fundamental aspect of relationship, which does make it makes the idea of changeless or immutable kind of complicated or hard to understand. So as far as the concept of relationship, and maybe that's the idea of rasa ultimately, it's something that I think you say Jiva Goswami and many of the Gaudiya tradition, and now we're talking about process theology. We see that Christian theologians or Western theologians have also thought about this idea. It essentially comes to this concept of a relationship with that divine, that divinity. And that's the crux of that kind of theological issue.
It seems like this is coming from some sort of fear based on our experiences with the relationships, with our personal relationships with other people. Like when we see people have changed, we have this, I mean, there's this idea that, oh, you've changed, so you're no longer the same. And like somehow it has this negative connotation, like, changing means it's bad or something like that. And you can't trust.
Mm.
I think like having that idea of a God who is changeless gives some sort of stability in the initial stages that, okay, there's a God who we can trust. He's not going to change. I mean, in one sense, that is true in a way that like he's not changing because he's always loving. Like he's never
Right.
going to stop loving. He's never going to do anything, like he's not going to hurt us. All those things are like the changeless, the noun part, like in the section.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think our idea in our tradition, when we think about something like a concept of Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, the ideas of Sat Chit that seems to go well with immutable. Ananda does too if we don't think about it. So what does it mean to be joyful or blissful? It has to have a sort of dynamic of change, a dynamic that's unexpected. Like, how are we going to have joy if we anticipated what was going to happen? I mean, yes, I shouldn't say that something won't be joyful if we anticipate. There's a lot of things we anticipate that would be joyful, but there is some aspect of this idea of relationship that has to be some level of like a surprise. Not always like, I think this is also something discussed, and there's more actually to discuss about the idea of awe or chamatkara. That's also discussed by Rupa Goswami. That kind of unexpected, like awe means like that's not something you calculated. It's something that's like beyond like something we could understand or articulate. So there is, when we talk about changelessness, it's something I think, it's something we have to think about more, like joy and changelessness. How does it all work together?
Yeah, and it is a changelessness in motion. Because if we think of our own relationships and marital relationships, there's like a whole, way of speaking about things becoming static and things becoming so rote and so the same thing, routine just happens over and over again. There's no excitement in the relationship. Nothing ever changes. So if there's like a problem in the marital relationship and they go to a therapy, oftentimes it's recommended, do something different, do something out of the ordinary, put life back in the relationship because spontaneity is life. And so with God, and you mentioned several times while you were speaking here today, a relationship. So if there is a relationship, then that seems to necessitate an interactive, a movement, a motion. So it's not two isolated beings, that one impacts the other. And again, turning to the concept of impassibility. So as being impacted in an interactive way. Not only is he not involved, but he's affected. He is changed by the love of his devotees, for sure.
Sorry, and I do think that also affects, like we're talking about relationship, and you compared it also to like say things like marriage. But when we look at sadhana, for example, like our practice, if we just see it as like this continual practice that makes us steady, yes, it makes us nishta, but there is an internal aspect that's changing our interactions, our prayer with the name is supposed to be developing those levels of like it's not this static experience. It has to continually internally go through different phases of growth. And when it comes to this like high level of love, of communication with the divine, it's not a static experience. I mean, these are the things that maybe the more subtle kind of debates that we'd have against something like Advaita Vedanta, what we call Mayavad. We're not just looking at an entity without variegatedness, or there's so much infinite dimension, change, vibration, mood, all of these like rich diversity that's included in that.
I'm so glad that you brought up sadhana, because when you were saying it, I think our sadhana grows dry and stale when it's not considered a relationship. Our sadhana isn't just an isolated activity that we do. It's actually part of a relationship. It's us showing up in relationship with the person on the other side.
Yeah.
Appreciate that point.
Yeah. And I guess that is also one of the, when they go through the Nam aparads, that it essentially is Bhakti Vinod, at least in the readings. He says the most one that we must be careful about is the pramada, the inattentiveness. It's like it's the most lack of relationship thing that there is. It's the essential lack of relationship. Imagine being in a conversation with somebody and you're not even looking at them, or you're doing other things. It's like, it's false relationship. It's like it's almost an insulting thing, because the person is right here. The chance for a relationship is there, and you're doing other things. You're not there. You're not present. You're talking on the phone. You're watching TV. You're zoning out. Even if you have a chance to like look at nature and appreciate it in that way, that's just like one level. Like, I appreciate the beauty of God, but really consider a chance to have a relationship with Sri Nam, the name of God, and speak to God. I look at it as speaking, as a relationship to speak with God, that little time to speak, connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, in our modern culture, a lot of our conversations are text messages where we're not present at all. So to take the time and to reevaluate how we maintain our relationships, and how present are we in our relationships.
Yeah.
I'm thinking when you were talking about our sadhana like being static, like it cannot be static, it has to change. So I'm thinking the change could go in either direction, right? Like, so it's not that it's any change. We want to change like toward love, like more in love, like evolve in love. So yeah, that's something I was thinking. How can we be careful and like mindful of that during our sadhana?
Yeah. Well, one thing that you brought up, Bhakti Ras and Sveta Dweet, this idea, like when you're saying, well, Bhakti Ras, you were saying about like texting, and we're kind of going into this culture. Even now we're talking. Actually, there's somewhat of a blessing that we can talk being in so many different places. It's not really the format, but it is like, and I learned this from chaplaincy, and it's a principle of Christianity, the ministry of presence, how powerful presence is. Of course, so understanding the presence of the divine, but our own agency towards presence. It's a very essential thing. And it doesn't matter if it was a text or an email, as long as you're kind of practicing presence to the person you're talking to. That's really the essential thing. Like, I could text you, but as long as it's like you feel that I'm saying, checking up and like, are you okay? Otherwise it's just, sometimes people want to, avoid seeing someone. Then it's like the opposite of presence. It's like, they called you, but you just text, what's up? Instead of calling back and saying like, hey, are you okay? Is everything, I'm not able to be there. I'm not able to be in the same room with you guys, but we're practicing presence by being able to have this discussion, meaningful discussion with each other.
Yeah, right. And that how much we are present is going to determine how much our relationship will evolve, whether we're talking about each other or with the divine. Our relationship, because it is a reciprocal thing, we must be present to have an impact on the other person, the impact on the relationship. So showing up and being present is part of the evolutionary process of our relationship. And if both parties are impacted by the other, then our presence is actually affecting God
Oh, yeah.
and his evolution as well.
Yeah.
That is something that would take some time to like grasp and really understand. I think that God is impacted by our presence, like how we approach the relationship, you know, because yeah, I mean, oftentimes the idea is that God is just there and we just do whatever we need to do, and as if he's not really like that, doesn't he's not affected by it. Like he is just like, yeah, constant kind of an idea. But yeah, this is like really mind-blowing to me that, yeah, we are like in any relationship, really, like we are influenced by each other. So yeah.
And he's dynamic, and he himself says that I reciprocate, right? How anyone approaches me, I reciprocate. And it's not like it's a multiple choice kind of thing. You can choose how you're going to approach A, B, and C, and D, and he'll reciprocate in one of those four ways. But we can approach in unlimited ways. So he's going to respond in unlimited ways. And both of those things are going to impact each other forever. Forever.
Yeah. I think that this idea, and I think this is a major part of what Maharaj's book is discussing, or this idea that there is kind of like a relationship that God also needs his devotee. Of course, it's articulated by the acharyas in many ways. It's not something that's a new concept. But I think when process theology kind of really became, developed with Charles Hartshorne, the idea that God needs us, that affected that idea of omnipotence. In fact, he had a book named Omnipotence and Other Theological Mistakes. But the fact that an all-powerful being needs something, that's another contradiction. That what we think, what does that mean? So there are a lot of we'll see a lot of the some of our acharyas, Jiva Goswami, speak and say that God also needs his devotee. That relationship he needs the relationship as well, and that he becomes surrendered to his devotee, things like that. Yeah, it is a mind, like if we really think about it, that really affects even our perception of our lives and the things that we do and how we're reaching out. Yeah, it's hard to grasp.
Yeah. It is blowing. Right, Swetadri.
Yeah, I was thinking like the line from Bhagavad Gita you were stating earlier. Krishna says, like, I reciprocate, like, according to how someone approaches me. The way I understood it before is that, like, it depends, like, if you want to worship or not. As in, if you're not, like, if you're choosing not to worship, then Krishna doesn't care. Like he's going to look away or something like that. And if you worship, then he's going to look at you and reciprocate. That's the way I understood it. And now, like reading this here, it's a completely different understanding altogether.
How do you understand it now?
Now it's like all in the context of love. Love is the foundation. And with this foundation, you can approach in any way. We can approach any way we want. Any way as in like what feels true to us. like any relationship, keeping it authentic. And he's going to, and it's a surprise for both parties. Surprise for us and surprise for God. So, yeah.
One of the other, if I may, I mean, I'm not sure if is it okay?
Yes.
There's one of the things Swamiji and I were talking about, and I'd sent him like a video of one of my Guru Maharaj's name is Ravinder Swarup Das. And so he actually inspired me to become a chaplain because of a series of lectures called The Cure of Souls, which is a story about a lecture series about Anton Boysen and pastoral care and possible concepts of pastoral care in a Vaishnava community. But he had said something like maybe a few years ago, and he's in Mayapur now, but more retired. He's not, giving as many lectures these days. But he had said in one of like the last lectures I saw of him speaking, recorded at the Bhakti Center, he had said, even to Krishna, the future is objectively fuzzy. And which meant like, again, this idea of omnipotence. And this I knew, I realized, I think maybe I just didn't know it when I was younger, that he was making work he did, even as a pastoral, a PhD student at Temple University in Philadelphia. That in many ways, the future, or what we think of is all-knowing, that it's actually being created. And I think within process theologies, the idea is that it's being co-created with the living entity. It's not set. And that actually is controversial. Like that's something of debate for Christian theologians, and perhaps even, our Indian Indic traditions also. Like, what does it mean to be fate? What is fate? And is it all simply controlled by God, by divinity? And so, this idea that we are co-creators of life, of our future. It's a controversial. I mean, maybe it's an issue of articulating it, and I don't know what you guys had thought about that. Like, this is like the revolutionary, this thing that's changing the way that we may perceive our sadhana, or how we see our worldview. I don't know how that concept is working with you guys.
Yeah, I totally love this conversation, because I also see it in that way. And I also, my own bias is that I can't see it any other way. I can't see that we're not co-creating. And when I hear people, or I think about myself, like going through something, or like if I think of myself as in the future, it's not like I'm just gonna have to go through like a tunnel and my future self is already waiting on the other side. And if I just go through this passage of time, I'll get there. But there is no there already there. It's
Yeah.
the passage, it's the going through, it's the living the life and the experience, which is creating that future self, which is not there any more than it is already present here. So the co-creation and the something already existing, fixed, hanging on a hanger. I just need to get there, get to that room, put it on, and that's the future. The future is not, it's not there. It's actually here. And it's in this unfolding and the interactive relationship between things that is actually creating the form of the future.
Yeah, I agree.
I had to take a deep breath. I was like, yeah, sorry. Please, deep.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel the same way. I can't see it any different way now, like considering free will and the element of surprise. Just like if God was to just like create everything himself and knowing what is going to happen and everything, it's boring. Why would he keep things boring for him? And even if it is just one-sided, okay, he is creating even though he doesn't know what is going to happen or whatever, but he's fully in control, then what happens to free will? Like, there is free will, we know that. So, when you put all that together, it only makes sense that, yeah, we are together in it,
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah. And having God's DNA, being made from his DNA, and his DNA is awe. It is fun, it is play, it is exuberance, it is becoming, it is we are the overflow of his joy. So that DNA, we must, it must be that way. Like it cannot be. I have the bias. I can't see it any other way, considering, as you're saying, Sweet Dweep, these factors that free will and boredom, and it's not that God creates this situation so he won't get bored. It's just his nature. It's something that always was. It's just his nature, and we have his DNA.
That there's this oops, sorry, there's this book, there's this academic at Berkeley who just published a book about a couple of years ago called Awe, the Power of, I think it's Power of Awe. His name is Professor Dasher Keltner. I spoke about this at a Sunday lecture or something, and this idea, well, he proposes that this idea of awe changes the way that we see the world. But he listed there, I think there were 8 things. I can't list them all, but he lists a certain number of things where we see awe, and that could be nature. It could be in like communal events, like say a concert or something like that. There are a few different ones he gives, but ultimately says the one that is most impactful for us is when we see awe in relationship. That like when, because I used to think of awe as like I'm here in Austria and we're in like the mountains and you see like
In
a sunset
Austria.
and oh my God. That was incredibly quick. I didn't think yeah. Uh, there's nature. That's always what I thought of awe. But actually, I when I think about it, sometimes the most that feeling of awe, the thing that gets like the hair on my arms raises when I see someone doing something kind or loving or selfless for another person. And that's a type of awe that just like really, really affects me, would really like make me melt. And I think that idea that, yeah, this idea that inside, you're saying there's this aspect of awe that is within us, or this thing that that connects us to this maybe ineffable, this very feeling-based experience of something, yeah, hard to describe, but it's actually the most, it's not seeing sunsets, stars, which we do see it. That's also in the Gita, we see like, Krishna saying, Yat Yat Vibhuti Mat Sattvam, like all these beautiful things. It's just part of me. But it's really essentially that the best expression of it is in relationship. That's also, maybe that's extending it, but that's something that this professor had said, that we see, really think about it. It's our it's our relationships where we see this transformative awe that affects how we might see it. I mean, we also see it in nature, but like, it's a very powerful thing that maybe we don't always consider.
Hearing you speak, I am sitting at the edge of my seat because it's what I'm feeling now is when we do look at these amazing things in nature and we are overtaken, it's not just because they are isolatedly beautiful things. It is the relationship that
Mm,
these things are an expression of God's love, of God's joy, and what we are experiencing in these moments of awe in nature is experiencing the joy that is implanted within these things, within the beauty. So I don't see what you're saying as something separate, that there's the
mm,
awe in nature and the awe in relationship.
you're
There
right.
is
Yeah.
the awe in the relationship of nature.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. That is it. And that's, I think, maybe Dasher, or I'm not to discredit, but this well-known professor, it's the relationship that gives the awe. It's that connection, whether it's through, you know, Krishna, God's beauty in nature, or the beauty in connecting with others in a musical experience, or just seeing one person doing a beautiful thing to another person.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines what Bhaktirasa was saying. So many people actually just go about their life without noticing what's around or without actually feeling awe for nature.
Mm.
It doesn't always have to even be really scenic places. We can just go outside and like look at a tree or a plant or just the bugs even and just like look at their lives. And there's so much awe in each one of them. So, like, that's what I was thinking. There has to be a relationship even there that brings out the awe, you know, not just the external beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is interesting. I'm actually curious to know what those uh, eight things are that bring out awe.
I could pull up the presentation, but I would hate to. Well, I could. Well, anyway, I don't want to do
Is it
that
something
right
that's
now.
public? Is it something that's public that you could put
Yeah,
like the link later on in the description of the?
yeah. I'll send it to you. Yeah, I think I saw. Yeah, there's something. Yeah, I could find it. I could find it. Um, but yeah, somehow yeah, I'm not sure. Was there is there a discussion of awe in the book, in Marge's new book, or is this something we were just kind of freely came upon, this idea of awe?
I think we came upon it in this discussion. I don't think it's
Oh,
mentioned in this section,
Mm,
but it is definitely the purpose of these podcasts is to further the conversation. So
mm,
this is it would naturally go in this direction. So
okay, that's great. I yeah, really looking forward to seeing the rest of. I think it actually was released in the time that I think I've been traveling, or within the past week or so, right? So I better put an order in for it.
yeah,
I'm sorry if that was a shameless plug of some sort, but
no shame, no shame.
But like Maharaj is always talking about awe. Like he says this a lot. Like, we should always feel awe and wonder to be able to surrender. There
Mhm.
is no surrendering without like awe and wonder. That's
Mm,
like so important, so crucial.
Yeah, it's a prerequisite. It's out of awe and wonder
yeah,
that there's true surrender. Yes.
I think that ever freshness of of that relationship is captured in that, like this thing where we're always going to be, we should be surprised, you know, even in our relationships, like with each other, with other humans, that's there, like those tokens of love or affection, that it's not the same thing. It's not like, or we see it differently, you know. When it's like Valentine's Day, I go to Trader Joe's and there's always like a long line of men waiting for the door to open so they can get some flowers for their wife or their girlfriend before they go to work or something. But it is a funny thing. I don't know how I entered into this group of people wait at front of Trader Joe's or wherever we go to for flowers before. Maybe I just told you too much about myself. So I'm sorry.
Sweet.
And Marge does actually talk about the ever freshness, and I'm looking here, and he talks about astonishment in this section, and he invokes the word nitya nutana as
Oh yes, yes. I
yeah.
highlighted because I highlighted sections. I was like, yeah, that word, that nitya nutana. Yes. Yeah, it's even if it is, it's almost hard to just be static. It's almost like it requires change. Even if someone is buying flowers and flowers and flowers, it's not like this. You're interacting with a static person. They're, they may say like, "Oh, flowers again, thank you," or the person themselves may evolve and say like, "Well, maybe I should try something new," or maybe, not chocolate, but maybe something that would express love in utilizing this idea of surprise, this idea of something ever fresh or refreshing things.
And hopefully it's not just looking for something novel. Oh, I did that last year. Let me do something different. But these are actually expressions of the fact that the relationship is evolving, that our affection and our care and our love for the other is evolving. Therefore, what I offer is going to naturally change if it's going to represent where I am now, what I am bringing to this relationship, and not just like, oh well, I'm going to get in trouble if I bring the same thing that I brought last time, but that it's a real reflection of an
Or if
evolution
I
of
don't,
Yeah.
or if you don't bring it, even as we offer, in my puja, if I offer flowers, like, do I ever think it's the same flower? Or we get them from different, oh, this is the seasons change, so what's available, and it just never seems static, but always internally I think, what more can I offer, or is there something better? These flowers are, I just moved to California, and so in my puja I may offer, when I was in the East Coast, it was hard to get flowers. I'd have to go to the store to buy like jasmine that was imported from India. But in California, there's like gardenias growing everywhere and roses growing everywhere. And so fresh flowers, that I never had access to before, give me a chance to offer something new, something different, and learn from that. Or learn like, well, maybe there's more, even more beyond just a good flower. There's something deeper, of course. It's not just the flower, it's the devotion, it's the love that's offered. But
it's the love that's moving us, right? Like, so when the love moves us, the evolving love, and it makes us do like different things. It's like, oh, I want to do more and more, but it's really the internal thing that's pushing us to do more or different, even like different flowers. It's not so much like externally it has to look different, but just because it's feeling different inside, we want to we like I mean, automatically the externals also look different. And I was thinking of this, like Maharaj mentions in this section, how God is created in love's image. I was thinking, then are we also not created in love's image? Like, if we are also being moved by love, God is also moved by love. So it seems like then we are both made in love's image.
mm, mm. Yeah, continually moving together.
Yeah.
There's,
I think,
oh yeah,
no, go ahead.
there is a text that I listened through, and it was just somebody had sent me an audio reading of Chamatkara Chandrika,
Chamatkar, yeah.
Vishwanath, by by Vishwanath Chakravarti.
I love that book.
And yeah, I was like, well, what's he? What he's just gonna? Krishna is just gonna. How's this gonna work out? He's gonna dress up like a gopi, and then she's gonna figure it out. And like I was like, well, how's he gonna get out of this one? Like, like how's this gonna play out? And like there was like this elevation. I was like, well, this is a situation that I'd not heard until that moment. I was like, whoa, this is a
Can you
very
explain just briefly for our audience who might not know what you're
Yeah.
referring to?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, it's a text by Vishwanath Chakravarti, who what is a 17th, 18th century a theologian in the Gaudiya or Bengali Vaishnava tradition. He wrote a text called the Chamatkara Chandrika, like whether the jewel or the moonlight or of surprise, chamatkara, of awe. That was really also just experiencing astonishment or just some kind of just what's next, not knowing what would happen, and the interaction between Krishna and Radha and the gopis is it's like a continually building drama, ever fresh, ever new kind of experience. At least that's what I was experiencing as I was hearing it.
That's amazing. Like as you were saying this, it occurred to me like, wow, actually, when this is going on, Krishna doesn't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
don't know. Sri Radha doesn't know what's going to happen next. But when we are reading, we are often thinking like, oh, they know everything and it's just all happening, like for us to read afterward or something like that, Not really like connecting deeply to understand. It's all like surprise for them too. They're really in there, like, in awe of every moment and just exploring it. That's beautiful.
And if God doesn't know what's happening in his own life as it in his own play, then if he doesn't even know how he himself is becoming, then that so much speaks to omniscience and omnipotence because he himself has free will that is being affected, that he himself doesn't even know what's going on. So what to speak of us and our relationship with him as well.
Mm. It's theologically it can be unsettling. It could be like like, what is this? Like how could he not know? And where are we? Like I'm part of it. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go with this? But I think that's part of the kind of ownership of agency for us to understand, like what does it mean to have, in this age-old discussion of theology, what does free will mean? Or why do bad things happen to good people? Like all of these things. This um, how can there be a omnipotent, how can there be evil in the world if there's an all-knowing God? Like these contradictions. And I think a lot of times because I'm a chaplain, I work with a lot of Christian theologians, and actually they talk a lot of process theology. When they see something happens in life, it's about trying to say like, well, where's God moving me? What does this mean in our relationship? It's not just a setback. It's not just you did something bad. It just means like, what does this mean in where do we go from here?
Yeah. What is this in our becoming?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You mentioned how it could be like a stifling thing. Oh no, my God doesn't even know, and how that could be like a threatening kind of thing. But on the other hand, it's a liberating thought because it allows for the real possibility of free will and therefore the real possibility of real love. Because one does not happen without the other, and there would be this without it is we would be impelled to believe that it is controlled and dictated to by God, and he just kind of overlays some way, giving us the idea that we're in control or the idea that we have a choice, but we actually don't have a choice. But that would not be real love. And he's not interested in anything else. He already has everything else. The only thing he doesn't have is our love. So he wouldn't cheat himself in that way. He wouldn't force it. He wouldn't want it. Why?
It's so fascinating that like God is not trying to control, but we want to control so much. Where is that coming from? I wonder, like why do we feel the need to control so much, like all the time? Like if we ever get this idea that like something's not in control, it's either that we have to have control of the situation or somebody else does. So like in relationship to God, it's comforting to know that, okay, God has everything under control. So even when things are like just haywire, it's like we like to think that, okay, God's in control. Like even if I don't know, like God is sorting this for me. Like he has everything under control. But to actually know, no, he's not controlling. He's just free flowing in love. And so are we. I mean, at least that's the way to just like live, like be alive, I think.
For me, when I hear you, Dweep, it's like I do believe that God is not in control, that he is controlled by love, and that same controlling force is is what controls us, but it is not different from us at the same time. So it's not that there's total chaos. Love has rules, but all of those rules are found within the free flowing, expansive nature of love. So that's what there is somebody in control, but it's not God. Love is in control.
This reminds me of one. I think this was a Radhashtami class given by Srila Prabhupada, and in this class, he's talking about it's Radhashtami, but he's talking about Krishna the whole time. The whole class, he's just saying Krishna is this and that, and all like glorifying Krishna. And everyone's wondering, like, wait, this is Radhashtami. Why is he talking about Krishna? Why not about Sri Radha? And in the end, he says, and this Krishna is controlled by Sri Radha. So, like her being love controls God. So God is controlled by his devotee.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. So beautiful and perplexing at the same time. It's a whole new, if we haven't embraced that before, this is a new paradigm, a paradigm shift to the efficacy, an agency of love as the compelling factor of all motion and all becoming. And this is, we think we need to control things because we don't actually trust that at the core of all things is love. We can accept anything. We can accept reprimand, we can accept chastisement, we can accept praise, everything if we know that the source of that is love. So we're able to relinquish a false necessity to control when we know how things are unfolding according to whose law.
So fundamental, that trust for all relationships, that trust that this is a loving interaction and that like we said, that fear, the fear could go away if you trust the intentions of the person. You might not know what the future is. You don't know what's going to happen, but you trust that this person, I love this person, they love me, I trust that, so everything will be okay. Whatever the case.
All you need is love.
All you need is love. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Is there anything, any stone left unturned that either of you would like to bring to the light in this discussion today?
I think there are probably a lot of stones for us to turn, and this as we've been discussing, in terms of our path and the future. But I want to, I'm looking forward to reading his book, as all of every publication he's done. I think has been so relevant. It really is like at the heart of, he really writes from his heart of things that are happening that are relevant. They're very hard things for people to discuss. And again, I think he's hit the chord once again.
Yes.
So
I see the same thing.
forward.
Okay. Thank you. If everyone feels somewhat complete here, then we will wrap up this session. Thank you so much, Kulapradipa, for joining us today and bringing your unique perspectives and your voice to this arena. So much appreciate your participation in this conversation.
Thank you, Bhakti Ras, and thank you, Swetadvipa. This was a very relishing discussion, and I hope we could have more discussions like this, or that will encourage devotees to have more discussions like this.
Yes, please, as the book is the beginning of the conversation, or part of it ongoing from prior, then there's the book, and now this furthering of the conversation. Of course, we hope that this is just the beginning of more and more conversations, deepening nuances, and it's beautiful. Thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you for inviting.
And now we invite our audience to stick around for just a moment, and we'll offer a space of pause.
Reflect on your feelings and impressions from this section. Has your perspective on a changeless God evolved? Does the concept of an impossible divine resonate with you? Take a moment to absorb the insights from this section, letting them deepen your understanding of an ever-fresh God. Visualize connecting with the divine person who is always evolving, and notice the emotions that arise: exhilaration, wonder, enthusiasm, or perhaps apprehension, uncertainty, or unease.